Locomotives are machines built for purpose. They're judged by horsepower, tractive effort, fuel efficiency, and reliability. They're evaluated on how many tons they can pull, how fast they can accelerate, how long they can run between overhauls. But there's one diesel locomotive that defied those standards. One machine that made people stop and stare, not because of what it could do, but because of what it was. The Alco PA wasn't the most powerful diesel of its era. It wasn't the most reliable. It didn't outlast its competitors, and it didn't win the technological arms race that defined post-war American railroading. But ask any rail fan, any industrial designer, any historian of American transportation what the most beautiful diesel locomotive ever built was. And you'll hear the same answer again and again: the Alco PA. Its curves didn't just happen. Its proportions weren't accidental. Its presence wasn't coincidental. This was a locomotive designed with intention, crafted with care, and built during an era when American industry believed that beauty and progress were inseparable. This is the story of why the Alco PA remains, decades after the last one pulled a passenger train, the most beautiful diesel ever built, not just in the eyes of train enthusiasts, but as a genuine work of industrial art. Before we continue, if you think our content is unique and informative, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Also, make sure to share the video with other train fanatics out there. To understand the PA, you have to understand the world that created it. You have to step back into an America obsessed with the future, an America that believed design could transform society, an America where streamlining wasn't just a style, it was a philosophy. The 1930s and 40s were the golden age of American industrial design. This wasn't just about making things work. This was about making things beautiful, making them modern, making them symbols of progress and prosperity. Look around a middle-class American home in 1948. The radio on the shelf had smooth, rounded corners and chrome accents. The refrigerator in the kitchen looked like it belonged in a science fiction magazine. The family car in the driveway had flowing fenders and integrated headlights. Even vacuum cleaners and toasters were being designed to look fast, aerodynamic, optimistic. This was the era of Raymond Loewy, who redesigned everything from Lucky Strike packages to the interiors of department stores. This was the era of Norman Bell Geddes, who created the Futurama exhibit at the 1939 World's Fair, showing Americans a vision of streamlined highways and modernist cities. This was the era of Harley Earl at General Motors, who turned automobile design into theater, who understood that a car wasn't just transportation, it was aspiration. And the railroads were right in the middle of this movement. By the 1930s, railroads faced serious competition. Airlines were faster, automobiles offered freedom, buses were cheaper. If railroads wanted to survive in passenger service, they needed to do more than just move people from point A to point B. They needed to offer an experience. They needed to make people want to ride trains. So they turned to design. The Burlington Zephyr, with its shovel-nosed stainless steel body, looked like a silver bullet streaking across the prairie. The Milwaukee Road Hiawatha, with its orange and maroon livery and streamlined steam locomotive, became an icon of speed and luxury. The New York Central hired industrial designer Henry Dreyfuss to create the 20th Century Limited, turning a train into a rolling work of art. Design wasn't decoration. It was strategy. It was marketing. It was survival. Railroads understood that a beautiful train attracted passengers. A modern-looking locomotive suggested efficiency, speed, safety. A well-designed livery created brand identity, made a railroad memorable, turned a train into a symbol of regional pride. And when the diesel age arrived, when railroads began replacing steam with compression ignition power, they brought this design philosophy with them. The Alco PA was born into this world. It was created during the peak of American streamliner culture, during an era when people genuinely believed that good design made life better, that beauty had value beyond aesthetics, that a locomotive could be, and should be, a sculpture on rails. Most locomotive builders in the 1940s treated styling as an afterthought. Build the frame, mount the engine, install the electrical gear, then wrap it all in a functional housing that kept the weather out. If it looked decent, fine. If not, well, it was still a locomotive. Alco didn't think that way. When the American Locomotive Company partnered with General Electric to develop a new passenger diesel in the mid-1940s, they made an unusual decision. They didn't just assign the project to their engineers. They brought in GE's Industrial Design Division, the same team that had been styling everything from turbines to household appliances. This was radical for the locomotive industry. Steam locomotives had evolved their appearance over decades, their form following function in organic ways. Early diesels were boxy, utilitarian, assembled from flat panels and right angles. But Alco and GE believed a passenger locomotive deserved better. It deserved design. The styling team started with clay models, just like automotive designers. They built full-scale wooden mock-ups to study proportions and refine details. They borrowed principles from aircraft design, understanding that streamlining wasn't just about reducing air resistance. It was about creating visual flow, about making a stationary object look dynamic. The PA's nose became their masterpiece. It's not a simple curve. It's a carefully orchestrated series of surfaces, each one flowing into the next. The centerline sweeps down from the cab roof to the anti-climber, creating a strong vertical element that gives the locomotive presence. But it's not just a flat slope. It's a compound curve, gently convex, so light moves across it in interesting ways. So shadows and highlights reveal the form. The sides taper inward as they approach the nose, but not uniformly. The taper accelerates toward the front, creating a sense of forward motion, even when the locomotive is standing still. The pilot area recesses slightly, creating depth, making the nose feel substantial rather than just a flat surface. Then there's the headlight housing. On most diesels, the headlight is just mounted on the front, a functional necessity. On the PA, it's integrated into a recessed bezel, a smooth depression that breaks up the nose surface, adds visual interest, makes you want to look at it. The windshield design is equally thoughtful. The pillars are remarkably thin for the era, giving the cab an open, airy feel. The glass is angled back slightly, echoing the nose taper, maintaining that sense of forward lean. The side windows aren't just rectangles. They have a subtle V shape, sharp at the back, wider at the front, reinforcing the aggressive, purposeful stance. Step back and look at the entire locomotive in profile, and you see what made the PA special. It's all about proportions. The hood is long, but not excessively so. The cab sits far enough back to create balance, but far enough forward to maintain visual weight. The roofline doesn't just run flat from cab to nose. It has a gentle upward sweep behind the cab, then a long, controlled descent toward the front. This creates what designers call a dynamic line, a visual path that your eye wants to follow, that suggests motion and energy. And then there's the belt line. On most diesels, the body sits high on the frame, creating a tall, sometimes ungainly appearance. The PA's belt line is low, giving it a planted, muscular stance. It looks fast. It looks powerful. It looks like it belongs on the rails. The Alco PA wasn't just designed to move trains. It was designed to be looked at, to be admired, to make people feel something when they saw it. And that required thinking like an artist, not just an engineer. Here's something most people don't realize about the PA's appearance. Those curves, those proportions, that distinctive silhouette, they weren't arbitrary aesthetic choices. They were shaped, in large part, by the mechanical realities underneath the carbody. Beauty and engineering weren't separate. They informed each other. Start with the frame. The PA rode on an unusually high frame structure compared to contemporary passenger diesels. This wasn't a styling choice initially. It was driven by the need to accommodate the Alco 244 engine, the main generator, the electrical cabinets, and all the associated cooling systems. But that high frame had a visual consequence. It gave the PA its muscular, planted appearance. It made the locomotive look substantial, powerful, like it was gripping the rails. The wheelbase was longer than many competing designs as well. Again, this was partly engineering, driven by weight distribution and ride quality requirements for passenger service. But the longer wheelbase stretched the PA's proportions, gave it that elegant, extended profile that made it look fast, even when it was standing in a station. Now, look at the roof. The PA has this beautifully sculpted roofline, smooth and continuous, with a subtle crown that catches the light. That shape wasn't just aesthetics. It was driven by the twin 36-inch cooling fans mounted on the roof. Those fans needed to move enormous volumes of air through the radiators, and they needed clearance, ducting, and space for the air to exhaust. The design team took that mechanical requirement and turned it into a visual asset, creating that smooth, flowing roof curve that makes the PA look more like a custom sports car than a diesel locomotive. The louvers along the carbody sides tell a similar story. Most diesels had louvers scattered wherever cooling was needed, with no particular thought to visual rhythm or pattern. The PA's louvers were carefully arranged, they are grouped, spaced with intention, creating visual order. This required the engineering team and the styling team to work together to figure out how to provide adequate cooling while maintaining aesthetic coherence. It's a small detail, but it's part of what makes the PA feel designed rather than just assembled. Here's something almost nobody talks about. The PA had interior service walkways running through the car body. This was unusual for passenger diesels. Most had external walkways only, but Alco included internal passages so maintenance crews could access equipment without walking outside in bad weather or at high speeds. Those internal walkways required width. They forced the car body to be broader than it otherwise might have been. And that breadth, that wide-shouldered stance, became one of the PA's most distinctive visual characteristics. It doesn't look narrow and delicate like some passenger diesels. It looks strong, commanding, substantial. The cab geometry reveals more of this engineering beauty relationship. The windshield pillars are thin because the cab structure was designed with enough internal bracing that the pillars didn't need to be massive load-bearing elements. This allowed the styling team to create that open, graceful cab appearance. The side windows have that dramatic angle because the cab frame could support the glass in that orientation without compromising structural integrity. Even the nose shape was influenced by what was behind it. The GE electrical cabinet placement determined how much space was available in the nose area. The air brake equipment, the multiple unit controls, the communication systems, they all had to fit somewhere. The design team had to work around these constraints, shaping the nose to accommodate the mechanical realities while still creating something beautiful. This is what makes the PA remarkable. It's not beautiful despite being a machine. It's beautiful because the designers understood the machine, respected its requirements, and found ways to make engineering and aesthetics work together. Form followed function, but form also enhanced function, making the function more appealing, more memorable, more meaningful. The Alco PA wasn't just a locomotive. It was a brand ambassador, a rolling billboard, a statement of corporate identity. And railroads understood this immediately. When you design a locomotive with large, smooth surfaces, with flowing curves and generous flat areas, you create the perfect canvas for livery design. The PA's car body was an artist's dream. No clutter, no awkward angles, no weird protrusions interrupting the visual flow. Just clean, continuous surfaces ready to receive bold colors and dramatic graphics. And railroads took full advantage. Start with the Santa Fe. Their war bonnet scheme, designed by Leland Knickerbocker, is arguably the most iconic diesel livery ever created. The PA wore it perfectly, the red bonnet sweeping back from the nose, the silver body gleaming in the desert sun, the yellow trim creating visual separation. On a PA, the war bonnet wasn't just paint, it was sculpture, the colors emphasizing the nose curve, the red bonnet drawing your eye along that flowing roofline, the silver sides reflecting the landscape. Santa Fe used PAs on premier trains like the Chief, the Super Chief, the Texas Chief. When passengers arrived at Dearborn Station in Chicago or Union Station in Los Angeles and saw those red and silver PAs, they knew they were about to experience something special. The locomotive itself became part of the luxury, part of the theater of long-distance travel. Southern Pacific took a different approach with their daylight livery. Bold red-orange across the nose and lower body. White striping, silver roof. The PA's curves made the color transitions dramatic, the striping crisp and dynamic. When daylight PAs led passenger consists along the California coast, they looked like they belonged in the landscape, the orange echoing sunset colors, the white suggesting surf and clouds. Delaware and Hudson chose striking blue and silver, creating one of the most distinctive PA liveries. The deep blue suggested speed and professionalism. The silver trim, carefully placed along body lines, emphasized the PA's proportions. D&H used PAs on trains connecting Montreal with New York, and that blue and silver scheme became synonymous with their passenger service, a visual identity that passengers recognized immediately. Missouri, Kansas, Texas, the Katy, applied a unique black and red scheme to their PAs. It was bold, aggressive, memorable. On the flowing PA car body, those dark colors gave the locomotive an almost predatory appearance. Powerful and purposeful. When Mexican railroads acquired PAs, they created their own identities. Ferrocarriles Nacionales de Mexico painted theirs in vibrant orange and white. The bright colors looked spectacular in Mexican sunlight, and those PAs became icons of Mexican passenger rail service, appearing in countless photographs and travel brochures. But the PA's role went beyond just wearing livery well. It appeared in railroad marketing in ways few other diesels did. Flip through passenger timetables from the 1950s. You'll see PA nose art again and again. Not generic locomotive illustrations, but specific detailed renderings of PAs in railroad liveries. Marketing departments understood that the PA's appearance sold tickets. It looked modern, fast, luxurious. It suggested that the railroad cared about aesthetics, about giving passengers a quality experience. Travel posters featured PAs prominently. Magazine advertisements showed PAs leading streamlined passenger consists through dramatic landscapes. Railroad calendars distributed to businesses and homes across America often included PA artwork. The locomotive became a symbol, not just of individual railroads, but of passenger rail travel itself. Passengers noticed. Unlike freight diesels, which most travelers barely glanced at, the PA attracted attention. People took photographs. They commented on its appearance. They asked locomotive crews about it. In an era when airlines were already competing for passengers, when highways were expanding and automobile ownership was rising, the PA reminded people that train travel could still be exciting, still be beautiful, still be worth choosing. And here's something interesting. The PA appeared in commercial brochures more than any other diesel of its era. When railroads wanted to show progress, modernization, commitment to passenger service, they put a PA on the cover. Not an EMDE unit, not an F unit, a PA. Because the PA looked like the future, it looked like what a modern passenger locomotive should be. The locomotive became theater. Watching a PA accelerate a passenger train out of a station, exhaust rising from its roof, paint gleaming, curves flowing from nose to tail, that was a performance. It was industrial choreography. It made mundane commutes feel special and long-distance journeys feel epic. This is what great industrial design does. It transforms function into experience, utility into emotion, machinery into memory. The Alco PA's commercial story ended disappointingly. Mechanical issues, maintenance costs, and changing passenger service economics led most railroads to retire their PAs by the mid-1960s. Many went to scrap, a beautiful machine, reduced to cut steel and melted metal. But beauty has a way of surviving. When most North American railroads retired their PAs, Mexican railroads saw opportunity. They purchased dozens of used PAs, giving them a second life, hauling passenger trains across Mexico. In Mexican service, often painted in those striking orange and white liveries, PAs continued doing what they were designed for, leading passenger consists through dramatic landscapes. Mexican service extended the PA's operational life by decades. Ferrocarriles Nacionales de Mexico ran PAs well into the 1970s and even into the 80s on certain routes. For a generation of Mexican rail travelers, the PA wasn't a retired relic. It was their connection between cities, their window into the countryside, their familiar companion on countless journeys. Meanwhile, in the United States, the PA was becoming something else, a legend, a symbol, an icon of a lost era. Rail preservation in America was still finding its footing in the 1960s and 70s. Preserving a steam locomotive made sense. They were historical artifacts, connections to railroad history. But preserving a diesel, especially one that had been commercially unsuccessful, that seemed odd to many people. Doyle McCormick thought differently. McCormick, a Seattle-based railroad enthusiast and preservationist, understood something crucial. The PA wasn't just a locomotive. It was a piece of industrial art, a representation of an entire era of American design philosophy. When he learned that Santa Fe PA number 62 was available, he acted. The restoration of Santa Fe 62 became legendary in preservation circles. This wasn't just mechanical rehabilitation. This was restoration as reverence, as respect for the designers and builders who'd created something beautiful. McCormick's team didn't just get the locomotive running. They restored the paint to exact specifications, polished the stainless steel trim, repaired every detail. They treated the PA like what it was, a masterpiece. When 62 finally operated again, leading excursion trains through the Pacific Northwest, it caused a sensation. People lined the tracks. Photographers traveled hundreds of miles for a chance to capture it. The locomotive drew crowds everywhere it went, not because it was powerful or historically significant in the traditional sense, but because it was beautiful, because it represented something people missed, an era when design mattered, when machines could inspire. Other PAs found preservation. Delaware and Hudson, 1618, now at Steamtown National Historic Site. Santa Fe, 59, preserved at the Museum of the American Railroad. Santa Fe, 190 and 194, under restoration by the Doyle-McCormick team. Each one became a pilgrimage site for rail enthusiasts, industrial design students, anyone who appreciated the intersection of form and function. But the PA's influence extended beyond preserved examples. Model railroad manufacturers discovered that PA models outsold almost everything else. Hobbyists wanted PAs on their layouts, regardless of whether those locomotives fit their chosen railroad or era. The PA's appearance transcended prototype, accuracy. People simply wanted to look at it. Industrial design programs began using the PA as a case study. Here was a product that failed commercially, but succeeded culturally. Here was proof that good design creates lasting value, that aesthetics matter, that beauty can outlive utility. Art galleries occasionally exhibited railroad artwork, and PA images appeared prominently. Museums displayed PA photographs and exhibits about American industrial design. The locomotive transcended its original purpose, becoming a symbol recognized even by people who knew nothing about trains. This is what mythology looks like. Not fiction, but truth elevated, truth remembered, truth that resonates beyond factual history. The PA myth says that machines can be beautiful, that industrial design matters, that commercial failure doesn't erase cultural success, that some things deserve preservation not because of what they did, but because of what they are. And every time someone sees a restored PA, every time a model runs on a layout, every time a photograph appears in a design book or a documentary or a museum exhibit, that myth continues. The PA lives, not just as a machine, but as an idea, a reminder that engineering and art are not opposites, that function and beauty can coexist, that sometimes, just sometimes, someone builds something perfect. The Alco PA didn't dominate American railroading. It didn't win the horsepower wars of the 1950s and 60s. It didn't outlast the EMDE units or the reliable F units. It wasn't the most successful, the most profitable, or the most practical passenger diesel ever built. But success isn't always measured in units sold or years of service. Sometimes success is measured in how a machine makes people feel. Stand in front of a preserved PA. Look at the sweep of the nose, the flow of the roofline, the way light moves across those carefully sculpted surfaces. Feel the presence it commands, even sitting silent on museum rails. That feeling, that response, that's what the designers were creating. Not just a locomotive, but an emotional experience. Not just transportation, but inspiration. The PA represents something we've largely lost in modern industrial design. It represents an era when manufacturers believed that everyday objects deserved beauty, when engineers and artists worked together, when a locomotive could be both functional machine and cultural statement. We live in an age of optimization, of cost reduction, of maximum efficiency. Modern locomotives are more powerful, more reliable, more efficient than anything from the PA era. But almost no one calls them beautiful. They're appliances, anonymous boxes on rails, designed by committee and built to specifications, and forgotten the moment they leave the frame. The PA was never forgotten. Decades after the last one hauled a passenger train, people still talk about it, still photograph the preserved examples, still build models, still create art, inspired by its lines. Because beauty isn't measured in tonnage or timetables. It's not calculated in horsepower or fuel efficiency. Beauty is measured in human response, in emotion, in memory, in the way something makes you stop and pay attention, makes you appreciate the care someone took to create it. The Alco PA makes people feel. It makes them remember an era when design mattered, when machines could be sculpture, when railroads believed that passenger service deserved locomotives that looked as good as the service they provided. Every curve on the PA was intentional. Every proportion was considered. Every surface was crafted. Nothing was accidental. This was design as deliberate act, as statement of values, as belief that the world deserves beautiful things. And that's why, more than 60 years after the last PA rolled off the assembly line at Alco's Schenectady plant, More than 40 years after most stopped running, the PA still matters. It matters to rail enthusiasts who see it as the pinnacle of passenger diesel aesthetics. It matters to industrial designers who study it as a perfect example of form and function in harmony. It matters to preservationists who dedicate years to restoring these locomotives. It matters to photographers who travel hundreds of miles for a chance to capture it. It matters because it's beautiful. And beauty, real beauty, created with skill and care and intention, beauty endures. The Alco PA wasn't just designed to move trains, it was designed to move people, not just from station to station, but emotionally, aesthetically, culturally, and 75 years later, it still does. The most beautiful diesel ever built, not despite being a machine, but because someone believed a machine could be beautiful, and then made it so.